In a galaxy where mercy is considered weakness and compassion is a luxury few can afford, humanity's greatest strength isn't their technology, their weapons, or their tactical genius. It's something far more dangerous to those who rule through fear: their stubborn refusal to abandon the helpless. When Commander Marcus Chun found a dying, paralyzed alien creature in the wreckage of a destroyed research station, every protocol, every regulation, and every ounce of military logic told him to leave it behind. The creature was useless, a white-furred, cat-like being from a species nobody had ever seen, unable to move its hind legs, barely clinging to life. But Marcus had always been the kind of human who made the galaxy's tyrants nervous. The kind who would carry the wounded when retreat was the only option. The kind who saw a person where others saw only dead weight. What he didn't know was that his simple act of compassion would unravel a conspiracy that stretched across star systems, challenge the most powerful empire in known space, and prove that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can topple the mightiest thrones. Because in a universe built on the principle that only the strong survive, humanity's willingness to carry the weak would become their most terrifying weapon. The emergency beacon's desperate pulse cut through the cosmic static like a cry for help in an empty cathedral. Commander Marcus Chun adjusted his position in the pilot's seat of a US Defiance, his weathered hands steady on the controls despite the debris field that stretched endlessly before them. What remained of Research Station Kepler 442 tumbled slowly through space, twisted metal and shattered hull plating catching starlight like scattered diamonds. "Sir, I'm reading minimal life signs," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the sensor station. Her voice carried the professional calm that came from 3 years serving under Chun. But he caught the underlying tension. Whatever happened here, it was recent, maybe 12 hours maximum. Chun studied the tactical display, his gray eyes tracking the movement patterns of the wreckage. The station had been a joint venture between the Terran Research Consortium and the Valdari Science Collective, one of the few successful collaborations between human and alien scientists in this sector. Now it was nothing but twisted metal and broken dreams, another casualty in a galaxy that seemed determined to tear itself apart. "Any word from command about what they were working on here?" Chen asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Classified, sir. Above our clearance level." Kim's fingers danced across her console, analyzing the scattered debris. But whatever it was, someone wanted it stopped. "These aren't random blast patterns, Commander. This was surgical, professional." Chen nodded grimly. He'd seen enough battlefields to recognize the difference between an accident and an execution. Someone had come here with a purpose, and they'd been thorough about it. The question was whether they'd found what they were looking for, or if something valuable might still be floating among the wreckage. "Take us in closer," he ordered. "Full sensor sweep. If there are survivors, I want to know about it." The Defiance was a mid-range patrol vessel, not designed for rescue operations, but Chun had never let ship classifications dictate his conscience. His crew had learned to expect the unexpected when serving under him. Where other commanders might file a report and move on, Chun had a reputation for digging deeper, for finding the human element in every situation. As they navigated through the debris field, the scope of the destruction became clearer. The research station had been massive, easily the size of a small city, with multiple rotating sections for different atmospheric and gravitational requirements. Now those sections spun independently, their connecting corridors severed, their protective barriers breached. Emergency lights still flickered in some sections, casting eerie shadows through the transparent aluminum viewports. "There," Kim said suddenly, highlighting a section on the main display. "Emergency shelter protocols activated in Laboratory Complex 7. Someone's alive in there." Chun felt a familiar tightness in his chest. After 23 years in space, he learned that being alive and being rescued weren't always the same thing. The shelter protocols were designed to keep someone breathing for maybe 48 hours. After that, it became a slow, cold death. "Can we dock with that section?" Kim ran the calculations quickly. "Negative, sir. The docking ports are twisted beyond use. We need to EVA over. Maybe use the maintenance airlocks. Prep the rescue pod, Chen ordered. I'm going over myself. Sir, regulations require that we verify the safety of any EVA operation before risking personnel. Chen interrupted smoothly. Since I'm the ranking officer, that falls to me. It was a creative interpretation of the rules, and they both knew it. But Kim had served with Chen long enough to understand that arguing would be pointless. When the commander decided someone needed rescuing, that rescue would happen, regulations or no regulations. 20 minutes later, Chen was sealed into his EVA suit, running final systems checks as the rescue pod prepared to launch. The pod was barely large enough for 2 people, designed for short-range emergency retrieval rather than extended operations. Through the small viewport, he could see the broken station spinning slowly against the star field, a monument to interrupted dreams. The pod's thrusters fired with gentle precision, pushing him across the void toward Laboratory Complex 7. Chen had always found spacewalks strangely peaceful, despite the obvious dangers. There is something about the absolute silence that helped him think clearly, stripped away all the noise and politics, and left only the essential elements of any situation. As he approached the laboratory complex, his suit's external lights revealed the full extent of the damage. Whatever weapon had been used here had cut through the station's hull like tissue paper, leaving edges so clean they looked almost surgical. Chen had seen plasma cannons and fusion torpedoes in action, but this was something else entirely. Something that suggested technology far beyond what most species possessed. The maintenance airlock was exactly where the schematics said it would be, though the external controls were dark. Chen activated his suit's emergency interface protocols, connecting directly to the station's backup systems. After several tense minutes, the airlock began its cycle, ancient machinery groaning as it struggled to function with damaged power systems. The inner chamber was dimly lit by emergency batteries, casting everything in a red glow that reminded Chen uncomfortably of blood. The air was thin but breathable, according to his suit's sensors, though he kept his helmet sealed as a precaution. Whatever had happened here, he didn't want to take any chances with potential contamination. Laboratory Complex 7 had been designed for biological research, with multiple containment areas and specimen storage facilities. Most of the equipment was dark now, powered down to conserve what little energy remained in the emergency batteries. Chen's suit lights cut through the darkness as he made his way deeper into the complex, following the life signs that his sensors had detected from a ship. He found the source of the readings in what had once been a comfortable observation lounge, probably designed for researchers to take breaks between experiments. Emergency heating units hummed quietly in the corners, fighting against the cold that seeped through the damaged hull. And there, huddled beneath an emergency thermal blanket, was something that made Chen stop in his tracks. It was clearly intelligent. That much was obvious from the way it tracked his movement with large, luminous eyes. The creature was roughly the size of a house cat, covered in pure white fur that seemed to glow in the artificial light. Its features were distinctly feline: pointed ears, a delicate nose, retractable claws. But there was something in its expression that spoke of intelligence far beyond any Earth animal. What made Chen's heart clench, however, was the obvious damage. The creature's hind legs lay at unnatural angles, clearly paralyzed, and there was a terrible stillness to its lower body that suggested spinal injury. It watched him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope, as if it understood that this strange bipedal creature might be its only chance at survival. Chen approached slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. His translator unit was attempting to establish communication, running through thousands of linguistic patterns, but the creature remained silent. Perhaps it couldn't speak, or perhaps its species communicated in ways human technology couldn't detect. "Easy there," Chen said softly, knowing the words wouldn't translate, but hoping his tone would convey peaceful intentions. "I'm here to help." The creature's ears swiveled toward him, and he caught a glimpse of something that looked almost like understanding in its large eyes. When Chen knelt down beside it, the creature didn't flinch away. Instead, it seemed to relax slightly, as if recognizing that help had finally arrived. Chen carefully examined the creature's injuries without touching it directly. The damage was severe, probably irreversible with current medical technology, but the creature was stable. Its breathing was steady, its eyes alert. Whatever had happened to the research station, this small being had survived against all odds. "Let's get you out of here," Chen murmured, reaching for the emergency medical kit attached to his EVA suit. As he worked to stabilize the creature for transport, Chen's mind was already racing ahead to the problems this rescue would create. Regulations strictly forbade bringing unidentified alien specimens aboard military vessels without proper clearance and containment protocols. The creature could be carrying diseases, could be dangerous despite its apparent helplessness, could be the property of some alien government that would demand its return. None of that mattered to Marcus Chun. He'd found someone who needed help, and he was going to provide it. The bureaucrats could sort out the paperwork later. The creature seemed to understand that it was being rescued. As Chun carefully lifted it, supporting its paralyzed lower body with gentle precision, it made a soft sound that might have been gratitude. Its large eyes never left Chen's face, as if memorizing the features of its savior. Getting back to the rescue pod was a careful process. Chun had to maintain life support for both himself and the creature while navigating through the damaged station. The creature remained perfectly still during the journey, as if understanding that any sudden movement might complicate the rescue. When they finally reached the pod, Chun faced his first real challenge. The pod's life support was designed for humans, not for alien physiology. He had no idea what this creature breathed, what temperature it needed, what atmospheric pressure would keep it comfortable. All he could do was monitor its condition carefully and hope that its apparent adaptation to the station's environment meant it could survive in human-standard atmosphere. The trip back to the Defiance was tense. Chun watched the creature constantly, looking for any sign of distress. But it seemed remarkably resilient, watching the star field through the pod's small viewport with what looked almost like wonder. Perhaps it had never seen space from this perspective before. Perhaps it was simply grateful to be alive. When the pod docked with the Defiance, Chun was met by his medical officer, Dr. Patricia Walsh, and a full emergency team. Walsh took one look at the creature and immediately began setting up a makeshift treatment area in the medical bay. "I've never seen anything like it," she said as she ran preliminary scans. "The physiology is fascinating. Definitely feline in structure, but the brain development is extraordinary. This is clearly a sapient species. Can you help it?" Chen asked, watching as the creature submitted to Walsh's examination with remarkable patience. "The paralysis is definitely spinal. The injury is old, maybe several months, but the creature has adapted remarkably well. Its upper body strength has compensated for the loss of its hind legs." Walsh looked up from her scanner. "Marcus, where did this species come from? I can't find any reference to it in the xenobiological databases." Chen didn't have an answer. The research station's records had been corrupted during whatever attack had destroyed it. The creature itself seemed incapable of verbal communication, at least in any way human technology could interpret. They had rescued someone whose very existence was a mystery. "Sir," Kim's voice came over the intercom. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Sector Command. They want an immediate report on our investigation of the research station." Chen looked down at the small creature, which was watching him with those impossibly large eyes. Whatever the creature was, wherever it had come from, it was now his responsibility. He'd made the choice to rescue it, and that meant protecting it from whatever forces had destroyed its home. "Tell Command we found evidence of an attack," Chen replied. "No survivors. We'll file a full report upon return to base." It wasn't technically a lie. They had found evidence of an attack, and as far as Command was concerned, there were no survivors who fell under their jurisdiction. The creature was a complication they didn't need to know about, at least not yet. Over the next several hours, as the Defiance continued its patrol route, Chen found himself spending more and more time in the medical bay. The creature, which Dr. Walsh had taken to calling Snow because of its pristine white fur, seemed to enjoy human company. It would watch Chun with bright intelligence, occasionally making soft chirping sounds that might have been attempts at communication. It's remarkable how adaptive it is, Walsh observed during one of Chen's visits. Most species would be traumatized by what it's been through, but Snow seems almost optimistic, like it believes things will get better. Chen understood that feeling. He'd seen it in human refugees, in survivors of disasters and conflicts. Some people, regardless of species, seem to possess an unshakable faith that tomorrow would be better than today. It was a quality that had always inspired him, and seeing it in this small, damaged creature only strengthened his resolve to protect it. But as the days passed, Chun knew that his secret couldn't last forever. Soon they would return to base, and there would be questions that couldn't be avoided. The creature's very existence would create a bureaucratic nightmare, and Chen had no doubt that there were those who would see it as nothing more than a scientific specimen to be studied and cataloged. He was determined that wouldn't happen. Snow, and he'd started thinking of the creature by Walsh's nickname, had already suffered enough. Whatever had happened at that research station, whoever had destroyed it, the creature deserved better than to become a laboratory curiosity. Chen had always believed that a person's character was revealed not by their successes, but by how they treated those who couldn't help themselves. Snow was paralyzed, helpless, completely dependent on the kindness of strangers. In Chen's mind, that made the creature the most important passenger his ship had ever carried. As he watched Snow sleep peacefully in the medical bay, curled up on a makeshift bed that Walsh had constructed, Chen made a decision that would change everything. He wasn't going to hand Snow over to the bureaucrats and scientists. He was going to find a way to give the creature a real life, a real future. He had no idea that this decision would soon put him at the center of a conflict that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. All he knew was that he'd found someone who needed help, and Marcus Chun had never been able to walk away from that kind of responsibility. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you threatened something under humanity's protection. 3 weeks after the rescue, Chen stood in Admiral Morrison's office on Kepler Station, tried to explain why he'd violated approximately 17 different regulations in bringing an unidentified alien creature aboard a military vessel. The Admiral, a woman whose gray hair and stern expression spoke of decades dealing with exactly these kinds of situations, listened with the patience of someone who'd heard every possible justification for creative rule interpretation. "Let me understand this correctly, Commander," Morrison said, leaning back in her chair. "You found this creature at the destroyed research station, decided it was sapient despite having no evidence of communication capabilities, and then brought it aboard your ship without proper containment protocols or xenobiological clearance." "Yes, ma'am," Chen replied without hesitation. The creature was dying. Leaving it behind would have been tantamount to murder. Morrison pulled up the medical reports on her desk display. Dr. Walsh had been thorough in documenting Snow's condition and behavior over the past 3 weeks, and the data painted a picture that was hard to argue with. The creature showed clear signs of intelligence, had adapted well to human presence, and posed no apparent threat to ship's personnel. "Your medical officer seems quite taken with our guest," Morrison noted. "She's requesting permission to continue her studies." Dr. Walsh is a professional, Chen said carefully. "Her interest is purely scientific." It was a diplomatic way of saying that Walsh had become as protective of Snow as Chen himself. The doctor had spent countless hours with the creature, developing a rudimentary system of communication through gestures and sounds. Snow had proven remarkably intelligent, quickly learning to indicate needs and preferences. More importantly, the creature had shown a level of emotional intelligence that was remarkable, seeming to understand when the humans around it were stressed or worried. Morrison touched her display, bringing up a series of classified documents. "What I'm about to show you is restricted information, Commander. The destruction of Research Station Kepler, 442 wasn't a random attack. Our intelligence services believe it was targeted specifically because of what they were working on there. The documents revealed the true nature of the research station's work. For the past 2 years, scientists there had been studying what they called enhancement technology, alien biotechnology that could potentially repair genetic damage, cure diseases, and even restore damaged nervous systems. The implications were staggering, but so were the dangers. The hegemony got wind of the research. Morrison continued, referring to the galactic government that controlled most of the known systems. They couldn't allow that kind of technology to exist outside their control. Too dangerous to the established order. Chun felt a chill as the pieces began falling into place. The hegemony was built on a strict hierarchy where each species had its designated place in the galactic order. Humans were considered useful, but dangerous, tolerated as long as they remained in their assigned role as miners and manual laborers. Technology that could level the playing field between species would be seen as an existential threat. "You think Snow is connected to this research?" Chen asked. "Your Snow isn't just connected to it, Commander. According to the classified files I've just accessed, the creature is the research. Project Chrysalis was developing enhancement technology specifically for its species, the Karathi. They were trying to find a way to reverse the genetic damage that had left most of their population paralyzed or disabled." Morrison's words hit Chun like a physical blow. Snow wasn't just an unfortunate victim of the station's destruction. The creature was the entire reason for the attack. Someone had destroyed an entire research facility and killed dozens of scientists just to prevent the possibility of the Karathi regaining their mobility. The Karathi were one of the most advanced species in the galaxy before the genetic plague hit them. Morrison continued. Their technology, their art, their philosophy, it was all far beyond anything other species had achieved. But the plague left 90% of their population unable to walk, and their society collapsed. They've been living on charity and goodwill ever since. Chun thought about Snow's remarkable intelligence, the creature's obvious understanding of complex concepts despite the communication barrier. It made sense now. The Karathi hadn't always been helpless. They'd once been giants, and someone was determined to keep them from standing tall again. "Who else knows about this?" Chun asked. "At the moment, just you, me, and a handful of intelligence analysts. The hegemony believes they eliminated all traces of the research when they destroyed the station. They don't know we rescued a survivor." Morrison stood and walked to the large viewport that dominated one wall of her office. Beyond the transparent aluminum, Kepler Station's massive rings rotated slowly, carrying thousands of inhabitants through their daily routines. It was a peaceful scene, but Chun could see the tension in the Admiral's shoulders. "This puts us in a difficult position. Marcus," she said softly, "if the hegemony discovers that we have a Karathi survivor, especially one connected to the enhancement research, they'll demand its return. And if we refuse, they'll consider it an act of war," Chin finished. Morrison nodded grimly. "Humanity's position in the galactic community is precarious at best. We can't afford to antagonize the hegemony over one alien creature, no matter how sympathetic its situation might be." Chun felt anger building in his chest, the familiar rage that came whenever he encountered injustice wrapped in political necessity. He'd seen it before, during the border conflicts with the Centauri Republic, when human colonies had been abandoned to their fate because defending them would have been politically inconvenient. "So what's the official position, Admiral?" "We hand Snow over to the people who tried to commit genocide against its species. The official position is that we never found anything at the research station except debris and bodies," Morrison replied. "As far as anyone outside this room knows, there were no survivors." Chun stared at her, trying to understand what she was really saying. Morrison had a reputation as a by-the-book officer, someone who followed orders and expected others to do the same. But she was also human, and humans had their own relationship with the concept of following orders when those orders conflicted with basic decency. "And the unofficial position?" Chen asked carefully. Morrison turned from the viewport to face him directly. The unofficial position is that Dr. Walsh's research into Kirathi physiology might be crucial to understanding their historical significance to galactic civilization. Such research would, of course, require extended observation of a living specimen under carefully controlled conditions. It was a beautifully constructed bureaucratic fiction. Morrison was giving Chun permission to keep Snow, disguised as a research project that technically fell under military jurisdiction. As long as they maintained the pretense that this was all about scientific advancement rather than compassion, they could protect the creature while staying within the bounds of plausible deniability. I'll need to transfer Dr. Walsh to a new assignment, Morrison continued, somewhere with better research facilities. Perhaps the medical station at Tau Ceti. Very isolated, very secure. The kind of place where sensitive research can be conducted without interference. Shin nodded understanding. Tau Ceti Medical Station was effectively a black site, a facility that officially didn't exist in most records. If Snow disappeared there, even the most persistent investigators would have trouble tracking the creature down. Thank you, Admiral, Chun said sincerely. Don't thank me yet, Marcus. This arrangement only works as long as no one asks too many questions. The moment the hegemony suspects were hiding something, this whole operation falls apart. And when it does, I'll deny any knowledge of what you've been doing. It was a fair warning. Chun was being given permission to follow his conscience, but he was doing so without official protection. If this went wrong, he would face the consequences alone. 3 days later, Chun found himself aboard a medical transport heading for Tau Ceti, with Snow resting comfortably in a specialized care unit that Dr. Walsh had designed. The creature had adapted well to the idea of another journey, seeming to trust that the humans around it had its best interests at heart. During the long transit, Chun spent hours sitting beside Snow's care unit, trying to develop the communication system that Walsh had started. The creature was remarkably quick to learn, soon able to indicate not just basic needs, but complex concepts. Snow could express curiosity, amusement, even what appeared to be humor. The creature's personality was emerging more clearly every day, and Chin found himself genuinely enjoying their interactions. It was during one of these sessions that Sean made a discovery that changed everything. He'd been showing Snow images from human history, trying to establish cultural context for their species' development, when the creature became agitated at a particular image. It was a photograph from Earth's World War II, showing disabled veterans in wheelchairs at a military hospital. Snow had started making urgent vocalizations, its large eyes fixed on the image with intense concentration. The creature began gesturing frantically, trying to communicate something important. After several minutes of careful back and forth, Chun realized what Snow was trying to say. The creature recognized the concept of artificial mobility assistance. Snow understood what wheelchairs were for and was trying to ask if such devices existed for its species. Chun felt his heart race as the implications sank in. Snow's paralysis might be permanent, but that didn't mean the creature had to remain immobile forever. Human technology had been developing mobility assistance devices for centuries. If they could adapt those technologies for Kirathi physiology. That night, Chin contacted Dr. Walsh on a secure channel. Patricia, I need you to research something for me. Human mobility assistance technology. Specifically, anything that might be adaptable for our patient. Walsh's eyes lit up with understanding. Marcus, that's brilliant. If we could give Snow some form of independent mobility, it would change everything. The psychological impact alone. Can it be done? I don't know, Walsh admitted. But I have some contacts in the prosthetics field who owe me favors. Let me make some calls. Over the following weeks, as they established themselves at Tau Ceti Medical Station, Walsh began working with a network of human engineers and medical specialists to design something that had never been attempted before, a mobility device specifically created for an alien physiology. The project was conducted in absolute secrecy, with participants told only that they were developing equipment for a classified medical case. Snow proved to be an enthusiastic participant in the design process. The creature's intelligence allowed it to provide feedback on prototypes, indicating which designs were comfortable and which caused problems. More importantly, Snow seemed to understand exactly what they were trying to achieve, and the hope in the creature's large eyes grew stronger with each iteration. Chun watched these developments with a mixture of pride and growing concern. What they were doing was remarkable, potentially revolutionary, but it was also increasingly difficult to hide. Each specialist brought into the project represented another potential security risk, another person who might ask the wrong questions or share information with the wrong people. His concerns proved justified when Dr. Walsh came to him with disturbing news 3 weeks into the mobility device project. "We have a problem," she said, her face pale. "One of the engineers working on the mobility system has been asking questions about our patient. Detailed questions about species physiology and biological markers." Chun felt ice form in his stomach. What kind of questions? The kind that suggests someone's been telling him what to look for. "Marcus, I think we've been compromised. Someone knows we have Snow, and they're trying to gather evidence." That night, Chun stood in his quarters aboard the medical station, looking out at the distant stars and trying to decide what to do next. They'd known this moment would come eventually. Secret projects had a way of becoming not so secret, especially when they involved multiple people and extended time frames. The question was whether they could complete Snow's mobility device before their secret was fully exposed. The creature had become more than just a rescue case for Chun. Snow represented something important about humanity's place in the galaxy. In a universe where the strong dominated the weak, where disabled individuals were written off as burdens on society, humans had chosen to invest time, energy, and resources in giving one small creature the chance to walk again. Chun made his decision. They would accelerate the project, take whatever risks necessary to finish what they'd started. Snow deserved the chance to move freely, and Chun was determined to see that happen, regardless of the political consequences. He had no way of knowing that his decision would trigger a chain of events that would expose one of the galaxy's darkest secrets, or that Snow's mobility would become the symbol of a revolution that would reshape interstellar civilization. All he knew was that he'd made a promise to a small, paralyzed creature, and Marcus Chun had never broken a promise to someone under his protection. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humanity decided to keep its word, regardless of the cost. The attack came at dawn, Tau Ceti local time, when a medical station skeleton crew was at its most vulnerable. Chun was jolted awake by emergency alarms and the distant sound of hull breaches, his military instincts immediately recognizing the controlled chaos of a boarding action. He rolled out of bed, grabbing his sidearm and emergency gear with practiced efficiency, but his first thought wasn't for his own safety. Snow was in the medical lab, 3 levels down, probably terrified and completely helpless if anything went wrong with the station's life support systems. Chun sprinted through corridors filled with emergency lighting, his boots ringing against metal deck plating as he made his way toward the lab sections. The station shuddered around him as whatever was attacking continued its assault, and he could hear the distinctive whine of energy weapons being fired somewhere above. He found Dr. Walsh in the main laboratory, frantically trying to secure their research data while keeping one eye on Snow's location. The creature was huddled in its specially designed habitat, large eyes wide with fear, but watching the humans with trust that made Chen's heart ache. Even in the middle of what was obviously an attack, Snow believed that Chun and Walsh would protect it. "How bad?" Chun asked tersely, checking the security feeds on Walsh's console. "Bad," Walsh replied without looking up from her data purge protocols. 3 ships, military configuration. They're not here to negotiate. Marcus. The security feeds showed armed figures moving through the station's upper levels with military precision. Their armor was unmarked, but Chun recognized the tactical formation and equipment loadout. These weren't pirates or corporate security forces. This was a professional military operation, probably special forces trained specifically for this kind of work. "Hegemony?" Chun asked. "Has to be." Someone finally put together enough clues to figure out what we're hiding here. Walsh finished her data purge and turned to face him. The good news is that the mobility device is finished. We installed it yesterday. Chen looked over at Snow and felt a surge of hope mixed with desperation. The creature was wearing what looked like a sophisticated mechanical exoskeleton designed specifically for Kirathi physiology. Lightweight but strong, powered by compact energy cells, it provided full mobility support for Snow's paralyzed hind legs. The device was a masterpiece of human engineering, adapted for an alien biology with a precision that spoke of months of careful work. Does it work? See for yourself. Walsh activated something on her control tablet, and Snow's exoskeleton came to life with a soft hum of servo motors and gyroscopic stabilizers. The creature's eyes widened as it felt the mechanical legs respond to its neural commands, and then Snow took its first steps in what Chen guessed had been years. The sight was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. Snow moved carefully at first, testing the device's responses, but quickly gained confidence. Within minutes, the creature was walking with fluid grace, the mechanical legs perfectly synchronized with its natural movements. Snow turned to look at Chun and Walsh, and the joy in the creature's large eyes was unmistakable. "My God," Chun whispered. "We actually did it." The moment was interrupted by the sound of cutting tools working on the laboratory's main entrance. Their attackers had found them, and they were coming in whether the door was locked or not. "Is there another way out?" Chen asked, though he was pretty sure he already knew the answer. "Emergency maintenance shaft," Walsh replied, pointing to a small hatch in the laboratory's back wall. "But it only leads to the outer ring. We'd still be trapped on the station." Chun weighed their options quickly. The maintenance shafts might buy them time, but they couldn't hide indefinitely. The station was isolated, with no backup coming and no way to send for help without the attackers intercepting their communications. This was going to end badly no matter what they did, unless they could change the fundamental nature of the situation. "Patricia, do we have any way to broadcast outside the station? Wideband communication, maybe emergency frequencies?" Walsh looked confused by the question. "Yes, but why would we want to?" Her eyes widened as she understood what Chen was thinking. "Marcus, that's suicide. If you broadcast what we've been doing here, it'll cause an interstellar incident. The hegemony will have to respond, and humanity doesn't have the military strength to survive that kind of confrontation." "Maybe," Chen agreed. "But if we don't broadcast, Snow dies here today, and everything we've accomplished dies with it. At least if we go public, the galaxy will know what the hegemony is really afraid of." The cutting tools were almost through the laboratory door. Chun could see the bright glow of plasma cutters working on the reinforced metal, and he estimated they had maybe 2 minutes before the attackers broke through. 2 minutes to decide the fate of not just Snow, but potentially the entire balance of power in the galaxy. Chen looked at Snow, who was standing steadily on the mechanical legs that represented months of human ingenuity and determination. The creature was watching him with those impossibly intelligent eyes, and Chen realized that Snow understood exactly what was happening. The creature knew it was about to die, but there was no fear in its expression, only a kind of dignified acceptance that made Chen's decision for him. "Set up the broadcast," he told Walsh. "Wideband, emergency frequencies, everything we've got." Walsh hesitated for a moment, then began rapidly configuring the station's communication array. "What do you want to say?" Chen thought about that as he moved to position himself between Snow and the laboratory entrance. "What did you say when you were about to start a war? How did you justify putting your entire species at risk for the sake of one small creature's right to walk?" "The truth," he said finally. "We tell them the truth about what the hegemony did to the Kirathi and what we've been trying to do about it." The laboratory door, finally, gave way just as Walsh established the broadcast connection. Armed figures in unmarked combat armor poured through the opening, weapons raised, and targeting systems active. Chen raised his hand slowly, keeping his movements non-threatening, but positioned himself directly in front of Snow. "Commander Chun, I presume said the lead figure, removing his helmet to reveal the harsh features of a career military officer. Colonel Voss, Hegemony Special Operations. You're going to come with us, and you're going to bring the specimen. The specimen has a name, Chen replied calmly. Snow. And Snow isn't going anywhere. Voss smiled without humor. I'm afraid you don't understand the situation, Commander. That creature is the property of the Hegemony Council, and you've been harboring it illegally. This entire operation has been an act of theft and espionage. Really? Chun said, noting that Walsh had successfully established the broadcast connection. Their conversation was now being transmitted on emergency frequencies across multiple star systems. I was under the impression that we rescued Snow from the research station that your people destroyed. The same station where you murdered dozens of scientists who were trying to help the Karathi regain their mobility. Voss's expression darkened. You're talking about classified operations, Commander. I suggest you stop before you say something that can't be taken back. Oh, I'm just getting started, Chen replied. He could see Walsh making subtle gestures indicating that the broadcast was reaching multiple relay stations. Within minutes, their conversation would be spreading across the communication networks of dozens of systems. Tell me, Colonel, how does it feel to be part of an organization that commits genocide against disabled populations? The Hegemony deliberately prevented medical research that could have restored the Karathi's ability to walk, Chun interrupted. You destroyed an entire research station and killed everyone aboard just to make sure the Karathi would remain paralyzed and helpless. What would you call that if not genocide? Behind Chun, Snow took a step forward, the mechanical legs of its mobility device moving with quiet precision. The creature was no longer hiding behind its protector. Instead, Snow stood tall, or as tall as its small frame allowed, facing the armed soldiers with a dignity that was unmistakably regal. Voss and his troops stared at the sight. None of them had ever seen a mobile Karathi before. The species had been paralyzed for so long that most galactic citizens had forgotten they'd once been capable of independent movement. Impossible vos we spelled. The genetic damage was irreversible. Chun agreed. But human technology doesn't care about genetic limitations. We built Snow a new pair of legs because that's what humans do when someone needs help. Snow took another step forward, then another. The creature began to move in a slow circle, demonstrating the full range of motion that the exoskeleton provided. It was a simple display, but the psychological impact was enormous. This wasn't just a disabled creature accepting charity. This was a member of one of the galaxy's most advanced species reclaiming their birthright. The Karathi were giants once, Chun continued, knowing that his words were being broadcast across dozens of systems. Their technology, their art, their philosophy, it was all far beyond anything the rest of us had achieved. But when the genetic plague struck, instead of helping them adapt, the galaxy wrote them off as finished. The Hegemony built their power structure on the assumption that the Karathi would never walk again. Voss raised his weapon, pointing it directly at Snow. That's enough. The creature comes with us, and this broadcast ends now. No, Chen said simply. It doesn't. Commander, I have orders to retrieve the specimen by any means necessary. Don't make me. You won't shoot, Chen interrupted. Because this entire conversation is being broadcast on emergency frequencies across multiple star systems. Every word you've said, every threat you've made is being recorded and transmitted. If you kill Snow now, you'll be doing it in front of the entire galaxy. Voss hesitated, and Chun could see the calculation in the man's eyes. This had been planned as a quiet operation, a simple retrieval mission that would never make it into the official records. But now it had become a very public confrontation, with political ramifications that extended far beyond anything Voss had been prepared to handle. Besides, Chen added with a slight smile, Snow isn't the only Karathi who's about to regain mobility. Walsh looked up from her communication console with a grin that was equal parts excitement and terror. The broadcast reached the Karathi homeworld 15 minutes ago, she announced. Their government is responding. They're requesting immediate technical specifications for the mobility device, and they're offering to trade their accumulated technological archives in exchange. The implications hit everyone in the room simultaneously. The Karathi had been forced into a subsistence existence by their disability, but they'd never stopped learning, never stopped developing new technologies. They'd simply been unable to implement or share their discoveries because of their physical limitations. If they regained mobility, the entire balance of galactic power just shifted, Chun said quietly. The hegemony's authority was based on controlling the most advanced technologies available. But the Karathi had been sitting on centuries of accumulated knowledge, waiting for the day they could use it again. Voss's weapon wavered as he tried to process the ramifications of what he was hearing. This wasn't just about one creature anymore. This was about the potential return of one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, led by a species that had every reason to resent the hegemony's treatment of them during their time of helplessness. It doesn't have to be a war, Chin said, reading the fear in Voss's expression. The Karathi aren't a vengeful people. They want justice, not revenge. But that justice starts with acknowledging what was done to them and making sure it never happens again. Snow stepped forward again, moving to Chin's side rather than hiding behind him. The creature reached up with one small paw and briefly touched Chin's hand in what was unmistakably a gesture of gratitude. Then Snow turned to face Voss and his soldiers directly. When Snow spoke, it was the first time anyone had heard a Karathi voice in over a century. The words came through the universal translator as clear and dignified as any formal diplomatic statement. I am Snow of the Karathi, daughter of the lost cities, heir to the walking dreams. I thank Commander Chun and Dr. Walsh of Earth for giving me back the gift of movement. I thank the humans for remembering that compassion is the highest technology. And I forgive Colonel Voss and his soldiers for their fear because they know not what they have awakened. The laboratory fell silent except for the quiet hum of Snow's mechanical legs. Voss slowly lowered his weapon, his face pale as he realized that he was possibly the first person in generations to hear a Karathi speak as an equal rather than as a dependent. What happens now? Voss asked quietly. Chun smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it was a smile without any trace of worry or fear. Now, Colonel, you get to go back to the Hegemony Council and explain how a simple rescue mission turned into the return of the Karathi to galactic civilization. And they get to decide whether they want to face that return as enemies or as partners. Outside Tau Ceti Medical Station, more ships were arriving. Some bore the markings of the Karathi homeworld. Others carried representatives from species that had been listening to the emergency broadcast and wanted to witness this historic moment. The age of hegemony dominance was ending, replaced by something new and uncertain. But in a laboratory, surrounded by the evidence of human compassion and ingenuity, Snow took another step forward into a future that had seemed impossible just hours before. The creature's mechanical legs moved with quiet precision, carrying not just one small being toward freedom, but an entire species toward the destiny they'd been denied for too long. Chun watched Snow walk and felt a familiar warmth in his chest, the satisfaction that came from keeping a promise to someone who needed help. He'd carried a paralyzed creature out of the wreckage of a destroyed research station, never expecting that creature to walk again. But humanity had never been good at accepting the impossible as permanent. In a galaxy built on the principle that only the strong survived, humans had just proven that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe was the simple refusal to abandon those who couldn't help themselves. And that lesson was about to reshape interstellar civilization in ways no one could have predicted. The revolution had begun with a single step, taken by mechanical legs built with human technology and powered by the unshakable belief that everyone deserved the chance to stand tall. Snow was walking, and the galaxy would never be the same.